Hey guys, I hope you are doing well. I miss you guys, and I will hopefully be able to come back and see you fairly soon here. Let's see. We are at this point, if you're watching this, you are almost done with Romeo and Juliet. So we only have one scene left to go. This is kind of the biggest scene in the entire play. This is the one everything has been building up to until this point, and this is when it really gets to be a tragedy. Because up until now, even the problems with Mercutio and Tybalt can kind of be smoothed over. Friar Lawrence has a plan that he's adjusted a couple different times, but up until this scene, there's still a chance something can go right in the play. So this is where we're really going to see, and the thing I want you guys to pay attention to is the character's tragic flaws. So if you guys remember, the tragic flaw is what makes a play a tragedy, and it's when one of the main characters, or really anybody who ends up dying or being destroyed, when they bring about their own destruction. So when they could have stopped it, but they had some kind of flaw that leads to their death. While you're watching this, everybody that dies, try to pick out what their tragic flaw is. What is the thing that leads them to basically destroy themselves? Because usually you can look at it and say, hey, if only they had known this, they wouldn't have done that. So it's kind of that dramatic irony, too. If you're yelling at them and saying, no, not yet, you just need to know this, then that's a good example of dramatic irony. And that's when the tragic flaws come in, because usually there's some issue that the character has that leads them to do what they do. Okay, here we go. Let's see. I just got to share my screen so you guys can see scene 3 right here. This is our very last one. If you guys remember at this point, everybody is coming back to Verona. So Romeo was in Mantua for a little while, remember, because he was laying low because he had been exiled. But he hears from his manservant that Juliet is dead because he saw the funeral. When in reality, we know Juliet's not dead. She just took that sleeping potion. So she's basically in a coma and it looks like she's dead. But Friar Lawrence's letter letting Romeo know that didn't make it there because of the Black Plague. The guy that he sent was quarantined, so he couldn't get to Mantua to let Romeo know. So Romeo is speeding back to Verona so that he can kill himself with Juliet, who he thinks is already dead. He bought that poison from the apothecary, so he can do that. All right, so churchyard, wherein lies the Capulet family tomb. So with this scene, think about you've got your stage split right about down the middle, or at least to this side a little bit here. So all of this right here is going to be graveyard. Think you've got your headstones, all that good stuff going on right here, typical graveyard stuff. And then this line, my hand right here, would be the doorway into the Capulet's tomb. And then on the inside, you're going to have, I'm going to put it halfway just so it's easier. On the inside, you're going to have all of the Capulets' tombs where they have the bodies. So you might have a couple little, I forget what they're called right now. Those little kind of stone coffins, if you think of those. And then at the very end, you're going to have Juliet usually laying on almost an open bed, stone. She'll be kind of surrounded by flowers, usually some kind of really big thing, but it'll look like she's dead. So we're starting out the scene on the outside of the tomb in the graveyard right here. So you see right at the beginning, we have enter Paris and his page with flowers and sweet water and a torch. So right here, Paris is coming up and he says in his little monologue right here, basically he's there because his supposed bride, his fiance, has died. So he's just coming to the tomb to show his respect. So really at this point with Paris, he's not doing anything out of the ordinary. He's just coming to show his respect to Juliet and he's sad. He's coming to mourn. The page, let's see here. He tells the page to leave. The page is kind of afraid to stand alone in the graveyard because it's creepy at night. And he says, yep, I'll go. So Paris, it says, strews the tomb with flowers. And he's sad. He hears, or he's sad because Juliet is dead and he was hoping to marry her. All right, so we're going to put that in there. Paris shows up to the tomb to mourn Juliet. And mourn just means just to be sad that she's dead, basically. So to cry, to say some nice things. He says some nice things in here, throws the flowers in front of the tomb. And then the boy whistles. And this was supposed to be the indication that somebody was coming. So Paris notices that. He says, the boy gives warning, someone doth approach. What cursed foot wanders this way tonight to cross my obsequies and true love's right? What with a torch muffle me night a while? And then it says he retires. So think about, you've got your graveyard out here. Paris hides behind a tombstone, okay, or a tree if they choose to put a tree in it. But he kind of hides himself because somebody's coming and he wants to see who it is. And then here comes Romeo and Balthazar, who was his servant, with a torch, a mattock, which is like a pickaxe, and a crow of iron, or just a crowbar. So Romeo says, give me that mattock and the wrenching iron. Hold, take this letter early morning. See thou deliver it to my lord and father. So basically, Romeo is going to break into Juliet's tomb. He's going to drink the poison and kill himself. His letter here that he gives to his servant, to Balthazar, is a suicide note, letting his dad know what happened and why Romeo is going to kill himself. He gives it to Balthazar and says, now go and don't come back. Balthazar says, I will be gone, sir, and not trouble thee. And in here, too, Romeo kind of threatens Balthazar a little bit. He says, let's see here, in dear employment, therefore, hence be gone. But if thou, jealous, dost return to pry, and what I farther shall intend to do, by heaven I will tear thee joint by joint and strew this hungry churchyard with thy limbs. So basically, don't come back or I'm going to kill you. Balthazar says, okay, I'm going. Romeo says, thank you, you're showing me friendship by leaving me here alone. Balthazar says, for all the same, I'll hide me hereabout. So aside, remember, Romeo's not going to hear that. His looks I fear, and his intents I doubt. So basically, Balthazar is concerned for Romeo, so he also hides, not in the same place that Paris would be. Romeo thinks Balthazar is gone, so he says to the tomb, thou detestable maw, O thou womb of death, gorged with the dearest morsel of the earth, talking about Juliet, thus I enforce thy rotten jaws to open, and in despite I'll cram thee with more food. So he's going to feed himself to death. He's talking to the door like it's death. And then he begins to open the tomb with the crowbar and the pickaxe. And then we have Paris come out. So this is when things really kind of start to go a little bit wrong. Paris jumps out. He's really upset. He thinks that the reason that Romeo is there is to desecrate the bodies of the Capulets. So he thinks that Romeo is getting in there to do something worse to Tybalt's body, to show even more shame. So he comes out and challenges Romeo. He says, obey and go with me, for thou must die. So basically, he's going to arrest Romeo and take him in. Remember, Paris is the cousin to Prince Aeschylus, so he has a lot of power. So basically, he is trying to arrest Romeo and saying, I'm taking you in. You broke the law by coming back to the city because you were exiled. Also, you were trying to break into the Capulets' tomb, probably to do something terrible. Romeo says, basically, leave me alone. I don't have an issue with you. You're totally fine, but you need to leave now, or else I can't be responsible for what I'm going to do to you. So Paris shows up to the tomb to mourn Juliet. Romeo comes after. And then, as we're going to see right here, Paris says, I do defy thy conjuration and apprehend thee for a felon here. Romeo says, wilt thou provoke me? Then have at thee, boy, and they fight. All right, so Romeo and Paris fight. And as you can see, Paris right here, oh, I am slain, and falls, which means he, oh, and then it says right here, if thou be merciful, open the tomb, lay me with Juliet, and then he dies. And right in here, the page says, oh Lord, they fight, I will go call the watch. So the page is going to get the watch, who's, think of them like the cops. So the page is going to get the cops. Romeo doesn't know about any of this, but Paris is killed. He dies. His last wish is lay me down with Juliet. So Romeo kills Paris. So Romeo, at this point in the play, has killed two people. Romeo says, in faith, I will. So he's going to lay Paris down on the inside because he said, Mercutio's kinsman, noble county Paris. So Romeo doesn't have anything against Paris at all. And he's actually going to lay him in the tomb with Juliet like he asked. So he opens the tomb, takes him inside. There's a picture. Drags him inside and then lays him down, laying Paris in the tomb. And then he looks over and he sees Juliet's body. So he runs over to it. So if you were having a hard time when I was explaining this earlier, this is kind of what the scene's going to look like. A lot of the time they don't have it in this one, but they will have like flowers. In the version you guys are going to watch, there's a lot of candles kind of all around Juliet's body. But yeah, so a crypt. It's like a mausoleum, burying place. Okay, Romeo, this is his final soliloquy because it's just him talking to himself. He goes through, and as he's talking, it's funny because he mentions a bunch of different times that Juliet still looks beautiful. She still looks like she's not dead. Okay, this is some more dramatic irony because we know Juliet's not dead. And in fact, her stuff is starting to wear off because it's been about 42 hours and she is on the verge of coming back to life again or coming back to life. She was never really dead. She's on the verge of coming out of her coma. And Romeo says right here, it's crimson in thy lips and in thy cheeks. So he notices she has color in her lips and her cheeks, and death's pale flag is not advanced there. And then he sees Tybalt. Ah, dear Juliet, why art thou so fair? Shall I believe that unsubstantial death is amorous or is in love with you? That the lean abhorred monster keeps thee here in dark to be his paramour. So he keeps saying again and again and again in here, Juliet, you look alive. You're so beautiful. It's almost like you're still alive. It's like, ah, she is. But he doesn't know that. All right, so Romeo sees Juliet. I'm just going to put down here, notices that she doesn't even look dead, but it's too late for Romeo. He picks up the poison. Come, bitter conduct, or the poison. Come, unsavory guide, thou desperate pilot, now at once run on the dashing rocks of thy seasick weary bark. Here's to my love, drinks the poison. Oh, true apothecary, thy drugs are quick. So basically, the guy he bought the poison from, it worked really well. Thus, with a kiss, I die. Kisses Juliet, usually lays down beside her on the slab or over the top of her and die. So Romeo takes poison and kills himself. All right, so it's finally starting to happen. Romeo is dead. And then remember, here comes Friar Lawrence. He's coming to get Juliet because she's waking up and he thought that Romeo wouldn't know in time. So he was just going to get her out of the tomb, take her back, and hide her in his cell. Friar Lawrence comes in and he says, St. Francis be my speed, how oft tonight have my old feet stumbled at graves. Who's there? Balthazar, remember, is Romeo's servant who hid because he was worried about what Romeo would do. Balthazar greets him. Let's see here. Balthazar says Romeo went into the tomb. Friar Lawrence notices that the tomb is open. Balthazar says Romeo went in there. Friar Lawrence says, how long has it been? Balthazar says full half an hour. So he went in there half an hour ago. Friar Lawrence says, go with me to the vault. So come on in with me. I don't want to do this by myself. Balthazar says, nope. Romeo said he was going to tear me apart and throw my limbs all over the graveyard. So I'm going to stay here. Friar Lawrence says, I will go in by myself. All right. So Friar Lawrence arrives and sees the carnage. Carnage we'll talk about in a minute here. So Friar Lawrence says, Romeo. He stops and looks on the blood and the weapons because remember, Paris and Romeo had fought outside of the tomb. Right now, Romeo's in here laying dead with Juliet. Friar Lawrence sees the blood on the ground and the swords that Romeo and Paris were using. So he is concerned. He enters the tomb, enters the tomb, sees Romeo's body. He says, Romeo, oh pale, so he looks dead. Who else? What? Paris too. So he sees Paris's body on the floor in the tomb, Romeo's body up by Juliet, and steeped in blood. So there's blood everywhere. The lady stirs, and now finally Juliet wakes up. just probably 5 minutes after Romeo killed himself, or even closer. Some people like to, when they do the play, they like to make it almost instantaneous. Romeo kills himself and Juliet wakes up right away. Juliet says, "O comfortable friar, where is my lord?" So where's Romeo? And remember well where I should be, and there I am. Where is my Romeo? Noise within. So now these two are inside of the tomb, the mausoleum, and there's a noise outside. It says within, but it means outside of the tomb. Friar Lawrence says, "I hear somebody coming. Thy husband in thy bosom there lies dead, and Paris too. Come, I'll dispose of thee among a sisterhood of holy nuns. Stay not to question, for the watch is coming. Come, go, good Juliet." Noise again. "I dare no longer stay." And he leaves. So Friar Lawrence, let's see here, we'll put Juliet wakes up. Friar Lawrence hears a noise, panics, and runs out. And he tells Juliet in here he has one last plan. He's going to get her out of there and take her to live among a sisterhood of holy nuns. So basically, all right, Juliet, this is all totally screwed up. Romeo's dead. Paris is dead. Nobody's ever going to forgive this. So come with me. I'll get you to be a nun for the rest of your life. And then he leaves because he's panicked. He's freaking out. Remember, Friar Lawrence is the adult in this situation, right? Juliet is still just 13 years old. Romeo was 16 or 17. So Friar Lawrence is the one that they're going to hold responsible for this if it all comes down. Juliet says, "Go thee hence, for I will not away. What's here? A cup closed in my true love's hand. Poison I see hath been his timeless end." So she sees Romeo. She sees the cup that had the poison in it. "O churl, drunk all and left no friendly drop to help me after, I will kiss thy lips. Haply some poison doth yet hang on them." So she hopes that there's still poison enough to kill her, but there's not. She kisses his lips, hoping to get enough poison off of Romeo's lips that she can die. But she doesn't have any luck with that. The watch outside of the tomb says, "Lead, boy, which way?" Juliet hears them, says, "Yea, noise, then I'll be brief. Oh, happy dagger." Taking Romeo's dagger, "This is thy sheath," stabs herself. "There rust and let me die." Falls on Romeo's body and dies. So basically picks up a dagger and stabs herself in the chest, which is a really tough way to go. So Juliet sees Romeo's body. Whoops. Body. And whoops. And then she's dead. So Romeo and Juliet are both now dead. So then come in Paris's boy, who remember was the one who went for the watch in the first place, and the watch. So the watch comes in. They notice what's going on here. Here's Juliet. Paris is dead. Romeo's dead. "Go tell the prince," he says. "Run to the Capulets, raise up the Montagues." So basically, go get everybody. They're going to want to see what happened. All right, and then here comes the watch with Romeo's man, Balthazar. So they find Romeo's man, and then Friar Lawrence and another watchman. So the watchman found Friar Lawrence trying to run away, grabbed him, and dragged him back. And then here come the prince and the attendants. The prince is mad. "What misadventure is so early up that calls our person from our morning rest?" So basically, why are you waking me up so early in the morning? Here come the Capels, Capulet, Lady Capulet, and the others. Lady Capulet says, "People are running around crying, 'Romeo, Juliet, Paris, what's going on?' The prince says, 'What's going on?' as well. Nobody knows. The watchman says, 'I found this friar and Romeo's man. Romeo is dead.' Montague comes in. So now we have everybody together. They see all of the dead bodies outside of the tomb, and they ask Friar Lawrence what happened. So Friar Lawrence at this point kind of has a choice to make. And the way he goes, is he decides to tell the truth. So this whole thing right here is just Friar Lawrence saying exactly what happened to Romeo and Juliet. So basically, he married them in secret. Then Romeo killed Tybalt. Romeo wasn't able, you guys know the story. So he goes back and tells everybody that, and basically says, "This was my fault, miscarried by my fault. Let my old life be sacrificed some hour before his time unto the rigor of severest law." So basically, Friar Lawrence says, "This was my fault that these two were dead. I tried to control this situation and I messed up, and now they're dead. So I'm turning myself over to the law. You can execute me." So let's see here. Uh, Everybody gathers at the tomb. Friar Lawrence tells the story. The prince says here, "We still have known thee for a holy man." So basically, no, I'm not going to kill you. You're still a holy man, which is a pretty generous thing to say, considering the fact that Friar Lawrence secretly married two teenagers, knew that they were suicidal, and kind of left, especially at the end, left Juliet alone by herself after she had discovered that Romeo was dead. So a lot of this, it depends on how you read it, but Friar Lawrence is the responsible adult here, and he knew what was going on the entire time. He just thought he could use these two to bring peace between the Capulets and the Montagues. So it's up to you guys how you end up reading this, but some people blame Friar Lawrence for everything that happened because he should have known better. He should have reached out, especially when he found out that these two were suicidal. But we're past that now. Let's see. The prince asked Balthazar, Romeo's servant, what he saw happen. Balthazar basically backs up Friar Lawrence's story and talks about the letter. Let's see. He looks at it. He asks the page what Paris was there to do, and the page backs up the story of Balthazar and Friar Lawrence. The prince said, "This letter doth make good the friar's words." So basically, Friar Lawrence is telling the truth. Their course of love, the tidings of her death. And here he writes that he did buy a poison, Romeo, of a poor apothecary, and therewithal came to this vault to die and lie with Juliet. Where be these enemies, Capulet, Montague? See what a scourge is laid upon your hate, that heaven finds means to kill your joys with love. So the prince here is basically blaming the Montagues and the Capulets for this happening, because if they hadn't hated each other so much, Romeo and Juliet could have been, they could have met, fallen in love, it would have been a good match, and everything would have worked out. The prince does not blame Friar Lawrence, he blames the Capulets and the Montagues, which is also another read that you can do. See what a scourge is laid upon your hate, that heaven finds means to kill your joys with love, and I, for winking at your discords too, have lost a brace of kinsmen. Basically, here he also kind of blames himself. He says, "I let you guys get away with this for long enough. And because of that, because I was so lenient on you, because I didn't come down on you earlier for fighting so much, I have also," he lost Mercutio and Paris, who were his kinsmen, cousins. All are punished. Here is the funeral scene right here. Capulet says, "O brother Montague, give me thy hand. This is my daughter's jointure, for no more can I demand." Montague says, "But I can give thee more, for I will raise her statue in pure gold, that while Verona by that name is known, there shall be no figure at such rate be set as that of true and faithful Juliet." Capulet says, "As rich shall Romeo's by his ladies lie, poor sacrifices of our enmity." Um, so basically, the Capulets and the Montagues make up. Romeo's dad says he's going to raise a golden statue of Juliet in Verona so that everybody knows what happened and everybody can be reminded of how dangerous such a feud can be. Capulet, Juliet's dad, says he's going to raise a golden statue of Romeo right next to her. So they're going to have kind of this monument in Verona forever, a golden statue of Romeo and Juliet side by side. The prince says, "A glooming or gloomy peace this morning with it brings. The sun for sorrow will not show his head. Go hence to have more talk of these sad things. Some shall be pardoned and some punished, for never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo. And exunt omnes, or exit all." So that's it. Basically, let's see here. Montagues and Capulets stop feuding. They bury the hatchet, and that's it. Um, that is the end. That's all there is to it. So that was the play, Romeo and Juliet. I hope you guys enjoyed it. One thing or a couple things I want you to think about with this is whose fault was it, everything that happened? Like I said, some people blame Friar Lawrence. Some people blame the feud of the Montagues and the Capulets. Some people would say Romeo and Juliet were old enough to make their own decisions. That definitely is another read on the situation. Even the nurse, too, she knew what was going on to a certain point, and she ended up turning her back on Juliet at the very end, but she could have told somebody earlier. So try to figure out, who do you think was to blame for this? Everybody that ended up dying as well, what led to their death? What was their tragic flaw? This isn't like real life where people die randomly for no good reason. There is a reason for every single death in this play. So try to figure out what it was, especially with Romeo and Juliet. What was their tragic flaw? What was the thing that they did that led to them dying? Because they killed themselves, right? They were directly responsible for their own. Let's see. I think that was the main thing I wanted you guys to think about, was whose fault was it that the play turned out the way it did, that it ended up being a tragedy, or maybe you think it was a combination of everybody. But it's up to you. All right, so that is all I've got for you right now. Hopefully you guys will have enough time left in this class period that you can start in on your final projects. There will be another video on that. But give yourselves a big round of applause. You made it through Romeo and Juliet. All right.